So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sankalpo and I represent business development at PMSAIF World. And we are, all things alternate. We have been doing a lot of good work here with our friends at MK. And in accordance and in that, realization of helping the investors make choice and help them connect with the top wealth managers of the country, we have a very special guest today, Mr. Bharat Parikh, and a very intuitive topic. We are calling it the 5 P's of wealth management. And all these 5 P's are very important. They comprise of portfolio, proportion, personalization, performance, and patience. So at different points in time in our investment journey or an investment life, we would have been questioned or answered questions on these 5 P's, and we thought we'll take them head on with Bharat today. So let me just give you a little bit of introduction to everybody on today's call. So I'll start with Bharat. So Bharat has almost a decade of experience in the financial markets. He specializes in various domains across, fund management, from corporate treasury to, proprietary trading to fund management and even dealing. So just discussing how, his illustrious his debt dealing career was, and he was associated with HDFC AMC for 12 years as a dealer and fund manager, post which he was at Reliance Industries Treasury for 5 years, managing an overall book of 75,000 crores. That's a lot of money. And then his brief stint was with DHFL for about 1.5 years, managing an investment book of close to 10,000 crore. And in his latest role at ICICI Securities Private Wealth Management, he heads the product and segment teams. That's Bharat for you guys. And our, the other hosts for today's call are Vikas and Sachdeva. He is the CEO at MK Investment Managers, and he is also an industry veteran with a lot of experience across key roles. He was the CEO of Edelweiss Asset Management, and he was involved in the successful turning around of JP Morgan's mutual fund business in India when it was taken over by Edelweiss. He is a member of a lot of governing and self-regulatory bodies like SEBI and AMFI. He's been there for a very long time and worked with marquee organizations like Enam, Birla Sun Life, and ING Investment Management. And he has a lot of good insights to offer on today's call. So, and I think he's the perfect host for today. And accompanying him is Sachin Shah, fund manager at MK Investment Managers. He is someone who is a keen observer of corporate governance, growth, and other such business parameters, and which helped him develop his proprietary model called the eQual, which we have spoken about in a little bit of detail in a few other previous calls, and I think we'll do it a little bit on this call too. And the other, invisible introduction that I have to make is for FinLearn Academy, who will be sponsoring the prize for best question today. So FinLearn is a one-stop, center for learning anything in the financial markets, from trading to investments. They've got highly qualified trainers with decades of experience who can provide you the right guidance if you are looking at navigating the market successfully. And with those set of introductions, Vikas, I think it's time I hand over to you. And you can take it ahead. Vikas, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है. No, we can't hear you. No, you're not audible, Vikas. Can I ask you to join in again? So, audience, Vikas will join in again. In the meanwhile, Bharat, let me just take advantage of the situation and just give us your initial thoughts on the second wave and how the market is reacting, and just a primer for investors till the time Vikas joins.
Thanks for having me here, Vikas and Sandeep. In terms of the current market situation, it's like, in the life of an investment and in an investment journey, there will be a number of events like this, right? Some are large, some will call us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Vikas, we can hear you.
Yeah, Vikas.
Okay. I think in the introduction, you should always mention one more thing, that I carry a jinx as far as technology goes. Invariably, you prepare for everything, but there is one little human element, which is Vikas Sachdeva's jinx, which I don't think you can prepare for. And it happened again. But that also means that this is going to be a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. Sankalpo, thank you so much for that introduction. As always,
Vikas, I'll ask you to just hold on 2 minutes. We had asked Bharat what is his primer on the current wave, because we thought you might take some time to join. So we'll let Bharat complete that.
Please, of course.
Yeah. So I hope I am audible and those jinx are not with me.
You're perfectly audible, sir.
Yeah, great. So what I was mentioning is that, see, in the entire journey of your investment, these kind of events will keep coming, right? Sometimes you will call it a small correction, sometimes you will call it a correction, sometimes you will call it a Six Sigma event, Black Swan event. All these things part and parcel of the life. It is. I say, in a journey of an investment, you have to take it for granted. It keep coming. Something which you will understand, something will come and hit you hard without your knowledge and without your understanding. Sometimes you will not be able to make to what extent it can deteriorate your portfolio returns and can impact. Broadly, you have to just understand that this will happen. What are you really buying? What is really your portfolio construction? Is your portfolio is capable of taking these shocks in your portfolio returns over a long period of time? As far as this particular second wave is concerned, I think broadly my take in nutshell is that, see, this will also pass. It's a matter of time. I think we were much more prepared this time in terms of handling the situation at ground level. Obviously, this wave is much larger in terms of the number impacted and overall, but I think now everybody, entire machinery now understand how to react to this, how to handle the situation. There will be some cases, some part of the country where situation may be out of the control, but it's just a matter of time. It's going to ultimately impact earning for maybe a quarter or two. It's going to impact the overall day-to-day life for a few months. But broadly, whether it is 3 months or 6 months, we will be back to normalcy. And I think we have to first and foremost understand that we have to live with this virus. This virus is not going anywhere.
Right.
So as we are prepared, I think we should be out of this.
Right. Thank you, Bharat. A lot of my audience has been, teaching on the comments that your voice is a little bit less audible. So I think we can fix that.
Maybe, yeah, I will get closer. I hope now it's better.
Yeah. So Vikas, over to you, sir.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now. Am I clearly audible right now? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. In fact, the question you asked, Bharat, is basically my opening statement. When I ask people around in the industry and his colleagues, of course, what do they think about Bharat Parikh? So one of the things I came to know is that Bharat is actually somebody who knows everything about everything. So you can ask him probably any topic under the sun, and chances are Bharat will know about it. In fact, one person actually said you should have put another P, the sixth P, which is called Parikopedia. Okay, so that is how knowledgeable our guest today is. And Bharat, thank you so much for taking time out and coming in today. I'm going to straight away dive into the topic. Basically, if you see the way the audience has responded to today's discussion, it is basically the 5 Ps in wealth management: portfolio, proportion, personalization, performance, and patience. So I'm just going to start asking you a very basic question here. You have the opportunity to interact with hundreds of investors on a regular basis, and you get feedback from all your relationship managers and clients, in probably a very unique way. You're probably the best person to answer this question: that is the ranking of these 5 Ps, the way I've mentioned, different from the way you look at it as an investor? And as a corollary, my question is, how do you rank the 5 Ps in terms of their importance to an investor's portfolio?
Thank you, Vikas. And I think I heard a new word today. I never got that name earlier, but thanks. But that's not the case. I think all of us are learners, and our job is to just learn. And I think every opportunity for us, whether you do it through books, whether you do it by interacting with others, the idea here is that every day is a day which is added to your book, and it's a new page which is added to your knowledge. So I think that's the way I look at it. As far as this 5P, the concept of portfolio, proposition, portion, personalization, performance, see, all these are part and parcel. You just can't see, investment ultimately is an art. Okay, whatever you say, you can use science, you can use lot of data, you can do lot of other stuff, but ultimately investment and portfolio management is an art. The art of fine management of all these. If you just try to imbalance, or if you say that okay, this particular P is not important, the entire equation will get derailed. So just to give you a very simple example, if you don't make a right proportion
Bharat,
of,
I'll just like to cut you there. Everybody is still, saying that the voice is very low on their systems. So, can we,
maybe is this better if I just switch off my video?
uh, can you just speak something and then we will know?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is it better?
On the comments, please. Is this better? I think I think you'll have to hold it a little bit closer. Yeah, I think we can. Let's give it a try, and then we'll again come back and see if it's not working out.
So sorry guys, maybe you want to change my network. Just give me a second. Let me just give me a second. I just change my Wi-Fi network. Hopefully that will work. Just give me a second, please. Don't
Sure. So in the meantime, till Bharat comes back, I never leave an opportunity to promote. Whenever I get a platform like this, I never leave an opportunity to promote our funds. And if I have a captive audience, sorry guys, but I'm just going to talk to you about something which is unique to us. Please do look up our website. It is about the eQual framework, the MK quality framework. And the gentleman in the frame, Sachin Shah, who's sitting there, is the one who's created that. It's been rigorously tested over 10 years on portfolios. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. There has not been a single dodgy management which has come into our portfolios over the last 10 years. In fact, this book was recently launched. There was a book launched on eQual by Mr. Gurcharan Das. I have put it up on my Twitter handle. It's on the MK website. Please feel free to go through that, and please do send us your feedback. I personally believe, after having spoken to a lot of people, that it is probably the finest nuance of governance in ESG that I have come across in a long, long time. But please have a look at it and please come back to us. I thought I'll just bring that up.
So I think that's a very beautiful kind of a philosophy around the framework of eQual, especially around how it throws up corporate governance things. So Sachin, you are the one that's made it, and if you want to take this time out and in the meanwhile we get Bharat back, maybe I'll just give him a call and can talk a little bit about it, because I think that is the portfolio part is very important for us. Oh, we've got Bharat back.
I think we got Bharat back. Yeah, let's continue with Bharat.
Let's continue.
Yeah. Hope I'm audible now, guys. Is
yes.
it better?
Yes, it's better. At least I can hear you a little better. Yeah. Let's continue, sir.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry for this network. So I was just talking about the 5 P's, right? So ultimately, you just can't change. It's ultimately investment is an art. You have to have a fine balance of all these 5 P's. If you create, example, you create a portfolio, but you are not cognizant of the proportion, whether it is a diversification, whether it is portfolio, whether it is an allocation, that can't be a right portfolio. If you don't have a patience, you will make a lot of mistakes in terms of managing the portfolio and the journey of investment. If you don't take the performance, you will obviously not be able to rebalance your portfolio and keep your portfolio on track. So it's very difficult for me to give a ranking to these 5 P's. The way I read it is that these are important pillar of your investment journey, and in terms of the way I look at it, is the 5 important dots of your painting, which is the art of investment. And if you don't have these 5 dots at right places and connect well, your painting will be not something which you will like maybe over a longer period of time.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so Vikas.
Yeah, please go ahead, Sachin. Yeah.
So Bharat, I think you made a very valid point that all 5 P's are very important. So let's try and evaluate each of these P's, is what I was thinking. So, in terms of wealth management, one of the very important things that we talk about is the asset allocation. And when we talk about asset allocation, it's essentially the portfolio construct that we'd like to do. So how would you like to go? I mean, how generally do you approach that? And when you talk about asset allocation, is it only equities, real estate, or are there some other assets also that you generally would look at? And how does that asset allocation as a process work with every at a wealth management platform?
Great question, Sachin. I think it's a very, very important part of any exercise to figure it out. How are you really going to create your portfolio? The entire concept of portfolio creation starts with a goal. Ultimately, what is the purpose of money? Okay, if you don't have a purpose in your life, you will never reach any place. Similarly, if you don't have a purpose of your portfolio, it's very difficult for you to
Bharat,
realize
I
whether you are
think
making a right decision or wrong decision.
Bharat, I think आपको देसी तरीका अपनाना पड़ेगा. You'll just have to speak louder.
Okay, so I hope this is better now.
I can hear it well and good, but the audience has some difficulties hearing it.
Hopefully now I'm better. I've just switched off my video as well. Hopefully that will reduce some bandwidth.
Yeah, please
But
continue.
I don't think it has got to do with bandwidth. You can just switch on your camera and speak a little loudly. I
Yeah,
think it's got to do a little with background noise. So you may just want to speak up a little loudly.
Okay, great. So in terms of portfolio construction, guys, it is very important that you start with the purpose, right? Ultimately, if you don't make anything without a purpose, you will not reach anywhere. Even if you get diverted on your path, if you know where is your goal, you can always make a course correction and reach back to your goal. So it is very important to start with a goal. You know what is the purpose of this money? Why are you having this wealth? How are you accumulating this wealth? In what period, how long you are going to accumulate this? Ultimately, how are you going to preserve it and then maybe ultimately pass it on to generation or the next generation? So ultimately, the wealth is all about first preservation, construction, and then ultimately distribution. So in terms of portfolio construction, whenever we look at any portfolio and we try to create a portfolio, I follow a very defined process. Ultimately, it's a process-driven investment, and which is the only part of, you can say, a science or something, a structure, which in terms of painting your investment journey, is that you first decide what proportion you want to have in preservation, core allocation, and alpha generation. And the way I call it as a PCA framework, it is that ultimately you need to know what kind of risk you want to take, what kind of return you want to generate, and for achieving this risk return or risk adjusted return, what kind of asset allocation you want to do. Everybody, see, most important, even a peace of mind is a wealth. If you can achieve peace of mind by doing a right PCA framework, that will also add in terms of making sure that you will be patient. So the patience will come in because you know what you have done, what kind of asset allocation you are holding, you know what kind of volatility will come in your portfolio. Once you understand the portfolio, it will also give you peace of mind, which will also help you stand tall in an adverse market like what we have seen last year. Now you know that my portfolio has an X amount of risk. You know that I've taken a risk on X amount of money. I know I can lose 30-40% of my capital, but I know that overall long period of time I'll be able to average it out. And hence you will be able to not take a harsh decision or taking losses. See, ultimately, when I lose money, it is not whether I am going to cut the loss or I am going to average it up. It will be your mindset and your mental state will decide whether you are going to buy or sell. At the same bottom of the market, there is somebody selling and somebody is buying. Everybody has a bias or loss aversion bias, right? If there is a loss, anybody will get panic when he sees losses. It is your mental state which decides whether you are going to average it out or you sell it. And that discipline, that patience comes when you have a right product and right portfolio construction through a PCA framework. It means that you have put in a right amount of money which is going to be preserved. There is a right kind of allocation to your core allocation, and there is a amount of capital which you are putting for a alpha generation. So when you put this entire portfolio into a PCA framework, you understand what are risks, what are rewards, what are risk adjusted return, and then ultimately you will have a portfolio construction which will survive all the adversity and all the volatility of the market.
Okay. So that was very well laid out, Bharat. But in the Indian context, we talk about equities, we talk about debt, to some extent maybe real estate. Are there any other? I mean, which are all the asset classes that you would consider for in the Indian context?
See, in Indian context, unfortunately, I think we lack diversification in our portfolio construction, and which is my common observation at lot of places, that when we see any client's portfolio, mostly either they are not well diversified. When I say diversification, doesn't mean in number of schemes or number of portfolio. See, ultimately there are so many avenues available. Okay, typical Indian, if you look at any typical Indian, will have one real estate which is I don't consider as a wealth, but it is a part of a consumption story. But they normally overexposed to real estate. So anybody who goes up the ladder in terms of his wealth normally ended having a much larger allocation to real estate directly. He consciously, subconsciously, unwillingly, willingly, or because of his parents or his past experience, is normally overexposed to real estate. When it comes to financial savings, and that's where I think we spend a lot of time in terms of analyzing the portfolio. Very simple, observation saying, sir, you are already too exposed to real estate, don't come to me for even more real estate. So that's a one normal observation which I give. In terms of financial, I think we only look at debt and equity as two asset class in India, which is, I think, is unfair. There are much more means to generate with a higher risk adjusted return. You need to consider commodities as a very, very important part of your portfolio. You need to consider global investments as a part of your portfolio. You need to diversify your equity risk. When you take a India equity risk, you are not taking only equity risk. You are taking a currency risk, you are taking a country risk, and you are also taking the equity risk of the place. So it's not only one risk. When you take a particular asset class, you take multiple risks. Are you diversifying, or are you doing a complete risk adjustment, or what you call the risk assessment of your portfolio with all the possible risks associated, including the correlation risk? So all those things have to be factored in. So in our scheme of things, I think a diversification of equity, a right allocation. When you look at fixed income, the fixed income portfolio should not be considered as what kind of return I am going to generate. Ultimately, fixed income portfolio should be able to generate a return higher than inflation, or what we call it as that ultimately it has to preserve the value. If your fixed income portfolio is not preserving the value, how are you going to really make a difference in portfolio? Ultimately, you are losing your capital. So it is important when you create those portfolios and do the asset allocation. If somebody tells me today, Bharat, I want to preserve my portfolio and I'm going to keep my money at 4% for next 10 years, I'm saying you are straight away going to cut your capital. Forget it. You are not preserving it. You are destroying your capital. Because if I'm going to keep my money at 4%, post-tax return for 20, then ultimately I'm not going. There's a very low probability that I'm going to beat inflation and generate any meaningful wealth for over a long period of time. I will be lucky even if I'm just able to maintain the value of my wealth. So it is very important what kind of product you select, what kind of asset allocation you do, what kind of portfolio construction you do, whether you are taking a right allocation between debt, equity, commodity, international. I think real estate you already have. There are alternative investments. So the product basket is vast. It is your ability to really understand the risk-taking capability which you have, what kind of assets you can live with. See, I tell you, investment should be as simple as it possible. Lower is the complexity of instruments, better it is. Because my simple philosophy is that if you are running a portfolio, first and foremost, the customer or the client or individual should be comfortable with the portfolio. Create a portfolio, and if you are not comfortable with the portfolio, either because of the complexity of the portfolio or either because of the excess portfolio allocation to particular asset, you will create a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety will ultimately result in the destruction of your wealth. And I use the word destruction every time because I know that anything goes wrong in your fight vision is ultimately going to hit you only on one day. The day you will throw your towel, and that will be the bottom of the market. And that's a typical behavior because you have not done a right asset allocation and you are not having peaceful investment. Ultimately, you should be able to sleep in the night with that portfolio.
Right. Thanks, brother. That was really helpful. Thanks. Because we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. What I try to do is increase the volume for Bharat by putting myself on mute. Maybe, I think when Bharat is talking to me or Bharat is talking to you, either of us can just keep our phones, the speakers on mute, just to see whether it works. Yeah, I think it is working now. At least the static has gone down. So, Sankalpo, I think, you've just run a poll. If you explain about the poll, it is probably a good leader to my next question on personalization. I think it's a very interesting poll which you ran. I would want you to talk about that.
Right. So the question that we asked to our audience today, Bharat, is I feel my advisor has personalized my portfolio. Okay. So 56% say yes, they feel so, and 42% of the audience says that they don't feel so. So that's still a higher number to have, if 40% don't feel that it's personalized to them. So yeah, Vikas, over to you.
Why I am very happy with the answer to this thing is because I always feel that an advisor's job is like a wicketkeeper's job. As long as you keep holding the balls behind the stumps and, you stump out and you run out, so what? It's your job, you're not doing anything great. But you miss one run out, one stumping, and, the whole fate of the match then is pegged onto the wicketkeeper saying, we lost the match because of you. Hardly any appreciation comes in for an advisor's job. So 60% of the people are now saying that my advisor has personalized my portfolio. I'm very happy to see that. But my question is actually a little intuitively against this question. I mean, I'm just trying to understand. Because, investors' needs are at different ends of the spectrum. I'm talking about now personalization. How much can you personalize an investor's portfolio? Does it mean that HNI investor portfolios are highly personalized or have to be highly personalized? Or are there some core needs of certain groups of investors which form bulk of the recommendations of an investor, and personalization is a small proportion of those recommendations? What about you?
I hope I am audible now. Yeah, great.
You're audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah, great. So because I think it's just I can only use the word impossible to have a portfolio construction if you have not personalized it. If somebody says that I have a portfolio but it is not personalized, means it's not a portfolio. First of all, a portfolio, as I mentioned at the beginning, ultimately, why do you have an investment? You have an investment for a purpose. If you have not personalized your portfolio, means that first of all, you have not defined your purpose. You have not defined why you want money, and you don't even know what is the use of this money. And hence, what you have done is you have randomly picked assets at random point of time and created a portfolio. A portfolio can be highly personalized or maybe not highly personalized, but straightforward, state jacketed. So somebody says that I am running a 35-65% portfolio or a 40-60 portfolio or a 60-40 portfolio. I hope that the guy has done the basic math that why is running 60-40 or a 40-60, and whether it is going to ultimately result into a portfolio value which is what he desires. So I personally believe that a portfolio has to be always personalized. That's why I said in the 5 P's, if you are not having the 5th P of a personalization, actually you are not having a portfolio, which is of requirement, and you have to personalize the portfolio. Now, there are simple guys with simple money and a simple purpose in life may not have a highly personalized portfolio. Very simple guys, I want a regular income down the line. Give me a portfolio which will just make sure that I don't lose the money. I make 10-12% IRR, and maybe down the line as I go older, it should even earn me say 6 to 8% return. I am happy and I get a regular income monthly. I think that's a purpose. And then if you create a portfolio just to meet this basic requirement, it's a personalized portfolio. So if you don't, as simple as a construction of a portfolio for no purpose is also a personalization, because ultimately he knows what is the money, whether it is going to be used for his retirement, whether it is going to be used for a consumption, whatever it is. So I don't believe that a portfolio can be constructed without personalization.
I think that's very interesting, very, very interesting, which actually, while you were talking about this, you took me back to an anecdote very early in my career I learned. When you start off your career, you usually start to think about things in terms of cookie cutter, one size fits all and all of that. And very early in my career, when I was a Birla Mutual Fund, I remember speaking to this 70-year-old ultra HNI. I was quite wet behind the ears then, but I still had the temerity to go and tell the guy that this should be your asset allocation. You have too much of money in equity. 90% of your money is in equity. Why do you have so much money in equity? You should have some in this, some in that. He just told me one very simple thing. But beta, आपकी उम्र कितनी है? I think I must have been around 30ish at that point of time. तो बेटा आपके जितनी उम्र नहीं है, उससे ज़्यादा साल मैंने स्टॉक मार्केट में गुजारे हैं. I know my risk appetite. I know this thing. I have enough money to take care of my day-to-day needs. I want to be in equity because I know that is a place to be. It just took me back to that anecdote. In fact, just as a follow-up question, I want to answer. I think you, by and large, answered that. But personalization largely depends on the needs, desirability, and rational choices available to any investors. How do you manage to blend the three? When you're talking about personalization, and what are the things that come along with the portfolio that any investor should be cognizant of? What are the things you should be aware of?
Sorry, because there was some disturbance in the line.
Okay, I'll just very quickly say that personalization depends on the needs, desirability, and to some extent rational choices available. You can't give him everything. So how do you blend the three, and what should an investor be aware of, in a portfolio when it is coming to him, a portfolio recommendation that is coming to him?
Perfect. So that's a very good question, Vikas, and I think it's very important. Ultimately, what you desire and what you can achieve may not be the same. There may be a vast difference between a desire and reasonable expectation, and a desire and an expectation which can be fulfilled. So it may be reasonable, it may be unreasonable desire also, or unreasonable expectation also, but a desire may be anything. So ultimately, a customer decides to create a portfolio and say, boss, I have a desire to double my money every alternate year. So that's a desire.
Correct.
You say, okay, boss, I want to double my money every alternate year. That's my goal. That's my desire, and I want to create a portfolio like that. And as a wealth advisor or in a case like that, I will say as a good wisher, I can only tell him two things, and I will say, sir, absolutely possible. There's nothing possible or there's nothing impossible which you can say in this world of investment, because it's as volatile and as risky. Ultimately, you can gamble. So if you want to really double your money every alternate year, there will be options availability. There will be an option to have instruments which can generate that kind of a return. But I can only tell you one thing. You may not only lose what you have, you may also lose which you might have not thought of losing it to generate that kind of a return. If you are ready and prepared to take that kind of a risk, I think I can help you. But I can't guarantee you. So I can help you in any desire which you want to fulfill. Whether it will get fulfilled or not, it is your choice, your risk ability, and your ability to lose the money. You can generate a 50% expected IRR portfolio with 100% loss-taking ability. There's nothing wrong, right? Today also, if you really want to go in the market and you say, this guy is there, okay, he's ready to lose all his capital, but he wants a 50% IRR. I think you will be able to find a portfolio for it. But then I think he may have to write on a stamp paper and maybe on the top of that get it notarized in person along with in front of a high court judge for him to do that advice. So I will not advise something like that. I will definitely don't mind doing it. I in my career of 20 odd years, I can tell you, because I have lived through every possible investment cycle. I can only tell you that I have sweat on my forehead when the AC was blowing on my forehead at 90 degrees, because that was the amount of risk which I was carrying. The risk can sweat you even in the coldest temperature. So it's your ability, right? And I think I tell you a very simple quote. What is your risk-taking capability is not what you believe. The best way for somebody to out what is his risk-taking capability is tell him to take a risk in the portfolio and go for a sleep. The day he is able to sleep, you can say, okay, your risk capability is there. The day he is not able to sleep, you know where he is reached. So I normally say that risk-taking capability is not what you believe is your risk-taking capability. It is your ability to sleep with that risk. That you are able to sleep with that risk peacefully. It is your risk-taking capability. So it is not your desire or your, what you believe. It is your ability to sleep with the risk, decide what kind of risk-taking capability you have. It's the best mean to find what kind of risk-taking ability you have. You tell somebody that you are having a, say example, a 10 crore portfolio, you are invested the entire money in equity, okay, and tomorrow if the market falls by 20%, what will happen? I don't think that guy will be able to even sleep.
Yeah.
But that's the way. How much money you are able to lose and how much money you can afford to lose will decide your risk-taking capability, and that is never known to the person. I'm just telling you, till you don't sit down, think over it, and sleep over it, you will not be able to understand what kind of risk-taking capability you have. You will always believe when you do a risk profiler, you will always come out as a conservative guy. Whenever you are creating a portfolio, you will be the most aggressive guy on the earth. And when it comes to a risk-taking capability and the losses, you will be the most risk-averse guy on the earth.
Interesting.
Just every time you go and discuss with a portfolio, with a client or with a HNI customer, you will find that at every instance, his thought process has changed.
Interesting.
Why he's changing? Because he is not able to understand that I want something more. As you rightly said, desire is different, your willingness is different, and your factual things may be different. And if you don't put all those things together, you will not be able to understand what you really want. For whenever you go and talk to somebody and you get little friendly with me, most of my time goes only in this.
Interesting.
I don't spend time on portfolio because that's only an outcome. Ultimately, so you have to just find out what is the right balance he wants to have in his portfolio. Once you get that balance right, I think the other things will be much easier. Not ever, nor he will come and ask me anything.
So, I'm going to ask you a question, and it is, since it's the cricketing season, I think if you can, apart from me and Bharat, if everybody else can just keep their audio on mute. I think last time we did it, the audio was much better. Sankalpo, Sachin, if you could just keep your audio on mute, I could hear Bharat much better that time.
Yeah, our audios are on mute, Vikas.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so suddenly I can hear him much better. And I'm hoping the audience can also hear. So now, Bharat, I'm going to now talk to you something. So far, you've been umpiring. Now I'm going to be asking to third umpire. I'm just making that sign. This is a question which comes to me. I am undecided into what side to take. It is basically on proportion. See, when I talk to some investors, people say that, all along asset managers have been talking about diversification. So the more the better. You have more stocks in your portfolio, more asset class in your portfolio, it is better. Okay. On the other hand, there are equally savvy investors who espouse the virtues of concentration. They say that in a market like India, if you don't have a concentrated portfolio, you may not be able to generate the sort of alpha you can. It could be basically in terms of asset classes, or if it is an equity as an asset class, maybe not more than 15, 20, 25 stocks in your portfolio. And the way they talk about it is, the risk is not in diversification. Risk does not get mitigated by diversification. It gets mitigated by knowing what stocks you are investing in. And frankly, that is the reason I'm asking you to adjudicate, because both these have some merit at some end. When you are looking at talking to your customer, how do you advise in terms of proportion? Is there something you'd like to share with the audience here? Bharat, we can't hear you.
But you're on mute.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great.
Perfect.
Great question, Vikas. And it's a difficult question, and I appreciate. And these are the questions which really come forward when you really have a real deep discussion about any portfolio. And I say very simply, because that anything in Ati, I think you understand Ati, right? Anything in excess is not good, right? So whatever you have, even if you have Amrit, and if he is in excess, it will not work. So ultimately, anything in Ati will not work. Whether you have a highly concentrated portfolio or whether you are having a highly diversified portfolio, either will not work. So it has to be a fine balance of a diversification and the concentration. See, if you have a highly fragmented portfolio, it will not give you a desired income. Now the question comes is that what do you concentration? What do you mean by diversification? A diversification into multiple asset is a diversification. A single portfolio into multiple stock is a diversification. So when you look at diversification, what are you looking at? Ultimately, what you have to do is that, are you spreading thin? So first, foremost in a portfolio construction is that what kind of assets you are holding. Fixed income, equity, debt, alternative investments, gold, commodity, real estate. Anything in excess of your portfolio is having 80% real estate. Sorry, even if you're best of the world, but you will be always, will have tough time. There will be a period when your net worth will go 2-3 times because it's inherently come with the illiquidity. By the time you want to decide to liquidate, I think maybe it's half of it will be out, because you will never liquidate on a rising market. You will try to liquidate in a falling market and you will not find a bit. So anything in Ati will not work. So what you have to do is a right allocation, a right fine balance between diversification and a concentration. See, when you look at, say, even Warren Buffett or anybody, the great investors, they always say that concentration, you should have a concentration. If you don't, so if somebody go and buy a S&P 500 and you say it's a great diversification, I say it's a great diversification of stock, but ultimately you are taking only one risk. So it may be a concentrated risk to invest in a US market in a dollar denominated portfolio construction where you are highly diversified in terms of the underlying stock. So when you have something like this, so I will say an Indian having 100% of his money in, say, NASDAQ, he is a heavily diversified maybe for some reason, but he is having at the same time taken a highly concentrated bet or putting all the money in a currency, in a country, in a very, sectors focused portfolio. If he says, no, I have invested in, say, S&P 500. When you say, okay, you're invested in S&P 500, great, you are well diversified portfolio, but unfortunately, you have a highly concentrated portfolio, single country risk and a single currency risk. So it's very difficult to say what is diversification and what is concentration. It is the fine balance which you have to create. And you have to be mindful of when you create it. So when you see, we normally look at concentration and a diversification in an equity portfolio. We only say, okay, I have a highly concentrated portfolio, a well-diversified portfolio, because you are looking at a very small piece of a portfolio. A typical portfolio, if it's not even 5% of your portfolio, if it's a diversified or a concentration, it will not make a difference as far as the correlation with your other investment is low. So if I have a portfolio which is maybe a highly concentrated portfolio, but I have 5 such portfolios, each of them have a very low correlation, actually I am well diversified. So it's the portfolio. So see, investment is an art which you have to look at in total. Anything, if you look at as a single piece, it will not solve your problem.
Interesting. Sachin, I think on this note, I think you would want to ask some question. I think you've been itching to ask on the performance bit. Yeah, that is very core to you also. Please go ahead.
Yes, so Bharat, I think it's been a good discussion. We talked about the portfolio construct, asset allocation based on the goals. You also explained about the, in terms of the aspirations and the goals, how one would go about, or even in terms of the concentration and a balanced allocation. But after doing all of this, one would always like to evaluate the performance. So how does one actually evaluate this performance? For different asset classes, should it be a different way of performing? And then I will come to a couple of more questions related to that. But inherently, does one have any particular way of, evaluating the performance of different asset classes?
Yes, very, very important part of any portfolio construction and portfolio evaluation is the performance measurement and execution. Ultimately, if you are creating a portfolio and if you are not measuring the performance, then you are not doing justice to your portfolio. You should be able to go through in-depth portfolio attribution to understand from alpha, where are you losing alpha. At the same time, most important problem and the most difficult part is to say whether I'm going to look at last 1 year return, 3 year return, 5 year return, 10 year return, 20 year return. Whether I'm going to look at a return of an asset class or I'm going to look at the underlying portfolio or underlying securities performance. So it's a very difficult task, and I say very simple. If somebody is looking to invest for a next generation or third generation, looking at last 1 year performance is not going to make any difference. You can't look at 1 year performance and decide whether I remain invested or not. See, in a performance and in a portfolio construction, what are you doing is that you bifurcate a portfolio into multiple assets. When you bifurcate a portfolio in a multiple asset, every asset class will have its own cycle. In that cycle, you have to understand whether I'm going to look at performance or not. And I'll just give you a very simple example of something where you need to look at very short performance and you have to look at something, a very long performance. Example, if you're looking at, say, arbitrage fund, I'm just giving you as simple as possible, as good as close to the liquidity. When you're looking at a performance of an arbitrage fund, what will you look at? 1 month return, 2 months return, 3 months return, 6 months return. Now, first of all, in your portfolio construction, you have decided that I'm going to keep 5% of my money in cash. The best risk-adjusted return I can get in cash is, say, arbitrage fund. So that's the first call you have taken from the portfolio construction point of view. Now you have to evaluate very simple that which arbitrage fund I should go on. And I can tell you it's very difficult to actually go and evaluate which arbitrage fund is doing better. First of all, the difference between the multiple arbitrage fund is too small. Second important point is that I just can't look at one, because if you suppose, example, you look at a performance on 15th of the day or 15th of the month, you are in the middle of the expiry. In the middle of the expiry, whether the basis points are positive or negative for that month will determine what is your performance rank between last 3 years. So it is just impossible to look at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months return to do any logical conclusion which arbitrage fund is better. So it's okay. I'll just tell you. So when you look at arbitrage fund, very simple. What do you look at? I tell my guys that, okay, when you bring to me an arbitrage, you only give me expiry to expiry return for last 12 months. I only want to see the NAV of the arbitrage fund on the expiry day, no other day, because all other day is irrelevant. Ultimately, the guy has put in an arbitrage position on the end of the, whenever the series is started, his performance for the next 1 month is locked in based on that blocking. Beyond that, so end of the month, I know exactly what kind of return is generated. Anything in the middle will not work. So I tell my guys, when you bring to me arbitrage fund, please show me only arbitrage fund which is expiry to expiry. So it is important to understand what is the cycle of the fund, at what frequency that cycle will work, at what point of the cycle you can evaluate performance of the product. So 1 day will be bad, 3 months will be bad, 6 months will be bad, 1 year will be bad. Here, so you have to look at a monthly performance, month after month, for last 1-2 years to understand whether this guy is able to consistently create a right arbitrage opportunity and capture in his portfolio.
But in terms of, say, other asset classes, like, say, equities, right, which is what I have been doing, and generally I have this challenge with some of my investors. What is a good time frame? Because when we invest in equities, one of the reasons, the best part of investing in equities is the game of compounding, right? As Einstein said, the eighth wonder of the world, compounding, and which is why we want to invest in equities. Now, when we talk about compounding, you need to definitely give a longer period of time. But what is the good time frame for equities to evaluate an equity portfolio performance?
Bharat, your audio is, I think, off. Bharat, your audio is off. Please turn it on.
Yeah, I hope now audible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yes, Sachin, I think is very important part of our portfolio, and I think it's actually consume a very large portion of our portfolio, and it is very important to give a right measure in terms of performance attribution and performance analysis, and it is very important, and it's not an easy question to answer. A guy, it's depend on what is the goal, for what purpose you have created this portfolio. If you are extremely short in terms of your next goal or your approach, you may prefer to do a last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year performance. And if you are looking to do a very long term investment, how does it make a difference that whether my equity has given me 2% return or whether it's given me a 20% return? Ultimately, portfolio construction where I need to do. And as I mentioned earlier, ultimately you look at the performance only to measure within the asset class. So first, your allocation to equity is not dependent on your equity performance. So the day you start looking at your past performance and start making a decision for future, you have first crossed the red line. Because everything is in cycle, right? Gold once in a different cycle, interest rate is a 5 to 7 year cycle, equity is normally a 10-year cycle. Real estate in US is a 100-year cycle. Corona or is a 100-year cycle. So now we know because of 100 years, now you can say, okay, it is a cycle. It takes almost a century to come back. So it's all depend. It's everything works in a cycle. So it is important that you don't take a decision in terms of your asset allocation based on the past performance. Performance or a future performance or an expected performance is what should you drive your asset allocation. If my portfolio today fixed income is going to generate me a 4 to 5% IRR return for next 5 to 10 years, it's a great place to be. My last 5-year performance in equity is very bad, wherein my GDP is growing very well. And it may be because my market was overpriced and now got reasonably priced. That should not make a difference that my last 5-year performance in equity is bad. So I should have under allocation to equity and higher allocation to debt. It is the future expected return what drives your portfolio allocation. Every asset class or every asset has an inherent earning capability. You have to evaluate the earning capability of the asset. You have to evaluate at what stage of the cycle you are in that particular asset class. With that evaluation, you can actually figure it out what is your right asset allocation. So I may prefer to invest in an asset class, performing asset class of last 5 years. Not because I'm looking at last 5-year return and doing that asset allocation, because I believe that next 5 year will make a difference here, considering the assessment of cycle and the earning capability of the asset class. Every asset class has a value. You can easily say what is the value of gold. Gold doesn't actually a pain. Even storage is a value. Cost is associated. But it gives you a great diversification. It gives you a value to preserve. It is a store of value. The day you start understanding that you also need to have a store of value, you will start doing allocation to gold. At the same time, keeping a gold in your portfolio when there is no reason to create a store of value is going to be creating a big hole in your portfolio. So if my fixed income, which is my preservation portfolio, is earning me 8 to 9% IRR, why the hell I will go and put a very large allocation to equity, gold? To give me any return. Even if gold going to give me a 20% return, the risk reward is not in my favor. But when globally interest rates are so low, alternative to investment is so low, diversification from equity, there's no other alternative asset available which can give me a reasonable low correlation and a diversification. Gold comes out as a natural asset class of to preserve your value of money from inflation. A asset class to preserve from the destabilization of currencies. Now that's the value what that asset class brings. Do you really want that value to be in your portfolio or not is what you decide. And based on your assessment, you decide whether this portfolio will be what allocation and how much allocation. So every asset class has its underlying earning capability and value proposition. You have to assess the value proposition of that asset, understand at what stage of the cycle that particular asset class is, what is your time horizon, is your time horizon and asset class cycle is matching your requirement, and if all those ticks are boxed, take an asset allocation. what proportion and what percentage allocation happens, it will depend on your ability to understand what kind of risk you are able to take, what kind of volatility you are able to understand, and how are you going to position these multiple assets at a multiple stage of the cycle in your portfolio to generate. A rebalance of the portfolio is also determined at what cycle you are in that particular asset class.
Right. So, Bharat, I think what you explained is fantastic, and particularly the example that you gave for gold is very, very good. But I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's a great perspective. But like a typical stock market investor, I want a tip. So from that perspective, what I'm going to ask you is that when I come to you and if you recommend, my portfolio to your investors, after how many years of underperformance you will say that okay, this is bad portfolio? How much time will you give me to say that my equity portfolio is good or bad? What is the time frame? What is the performance time frame?
So basically, Sachin, you're asking the investor to be patient. You're asking now, Bharat, when is his patience going to run out?
Yes,
in terms of a particular asset class or a particular investment manager? Very good question. Bharat, I think I'd like to listen to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you guys are asking something which is very important, at the same time very difficult to answer a question, but let me
of course.
See, as I mentioned, Sachin, it is when I look at a portfolio, first I am looking into an isolation that I or my clients have already decided to make an allocation to equity. Within the equity allocation, which portfolio should be part of his allocation and which should not be part of his asset allocation. I always tell my team that part performance, last 1 year return, 2 year return, 3 year return are one important part of the portfolio and a portfolio attribution which you do. There are other 10,000 things which you have to look at into the portfolio before you make a decision whether this portfolio has run out of its time or it's going to underperform and outperform. I think, see, as I mentioned, investment is an art, okay? And every fund manager, see, I have managed money personally for 17 years as a manager of a money, and I have gone through the cycle of underperformance and overperformance. I have seen through the when you lost out or you were stop lost out for a month or a quarter, and on those phases, you know that it is nothing is guaranteed in this world, and there will be phase of underperformance and outperformance, and nothing is constant in this world. One thing which is certain here is uncertainty. So I when I look at a portfolio and when I look at any particular fund manager, I think I give a decent weightage to a past performance, but that may not be the only criteria to decide whether that portfolio should be part of the asset allocation or not. It's a multi-fold, multi-phased, or I can say multi-layer analysis. It starts from quantitative, it goes into qualitative, it goes into filtration, it goes what we call fitment. What we also do is a complementary portfolio. So there are multiple things. As I mentioned earlier, a diversified portfolio when you look at, or a concentrated portfolio when you look at, it may not be a good portfolio and maybe a part of somebody's portfolio. But if you look at 3 concentrated portfolio, if they complement each other, is actually giving a diversification. And what will happen is that each of these portfolio will actually underperform in some phases. But ultimately, over a long period of time, is giving him the diversification, which may not be possible to get otherwise. At the same time, are we conscious of the fact that what teams they are playing? Are they seasonal players? Are they players which are just going to perform in a particular cycle for a particular period of time? And they are not will be able to withstand, have a consistency in their portfolio return. It will be very difficult to position that portfolio as a part of portfolio. So I in nutshell, Sachin, quantitative and performance is one factor, qualitative is another factor, fitment is the third factor, and fourth is ultimately whether it makes sense and whether the fund manager have a process, whether the fund manager have a thought process and flow which will make him stand on right. Manager is going to go and throw his towel when the market is 20% down, or the guy is ready to take the plunge and actually will add up and take a higher risk at a lower level, is what will determine whether I want to do it. So When I do assessment, I think I spend 90% of my time on a qualitative factor, and my team spend good amount of time in the quantitative factors as well.
Fantastic, Bharat. That's a very, very holistic and very nice fresh perspective. That's very helpful. Thank you. One more thing from my side. We all talk about as you mentioned, when the market is down 20%, and how does it work, or even for a longer period of time, when like last 5 years equities haven't delivered good returns. So patience is something what investors have to get onto the table, right? It's all about the temperament, it's about the patience, it's about discipline. So how does an investor build that, and what is the role of an advisor also when it comes to, because even the advisor will have to be patient and have the belief in the product, right? So how does the investor create that patience or that temperament actually?
Sachin, I think in all the 5 P, this is one of the very, very important P, and this P will only come if your other 4 P's are correct. In case any of the P is not at the place where it should be, it will be very difficult for you to get. The patience comes not because what investor think, it is the state of mind which is what patience will work. So even an advisor can lose his patience and actually may end up advising something wrong to the investor, because he might have also lost the 50. A very debated or highly intense discussion between a client and an advisor, which is associated with the underperformance, may actually make investor and advisor both impatient. So it is see, first of all, patience is important part. I think it's well documented, everybody understands, everybody talks about it. But how do you really bring that patience in your portfolio is more important. If you can bring patience in your portfolio and your portfolio construction and in your mind, in the state in which you operate, at what point of time, what you are thinking, ultimately patience comes from the thought process. Looking positively, are you looking at negatively? Are you staring at your losses? Are you staring at an opportunity? Are you looking at last 5-year performance at 5% negative IRR? Or are you looking at the fact that 10% GDP growth for last 5 years, after 1 year 20% GDP growth, and then 10% GDP growth down the line? Is it a great time to buy? Because it is so are you looking at staring? What are you reading? Are you reading a newspaper which contains everything related to pandemic, associated negative news, and ultimate impact on the portfolio, or are you looking at and reading at something which is more to do with the fact that how is going to ultimately impact, what is going to be long-term and short-term impact, broadly how much damages it will do in a long-term period. Ultimately, you are investing for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. How does it make a difference what happens in next 1 year and 2 years? If tomorrow, very simple, Vikas, I'll just come and tell you, Vikas, I have a confirmed tip. Tomorrow market is going to tank 10%. Are you going to go and sell off all your equity?
Definitely not.
You will do it, right? It means
No,
that not.
So I said that maybe not.
Maybe not. That's great. That's great to hear that. I'm just saying that it should not make a difference. So if you believe that the probability, ultimately investment is a foresight, right? You don't do now. You don't expect it returns. If you see my market is overvalued and you believe the next 1 year, 2 year return can be subdued, ultimately it is your expected return, expected PE, and all are expected, right? Nobody says that my stock, bond, yield, anything is based on the past performance. Everything is on expectation. So nothing is. It is your ability to read the past and see what kind of expectation you have and what mindset you will have. Are you ready to say, okay, कोई बात नहीं, last 3 years में 20% CAGR आया है, next 5 year का मेरा return 3% से 20% कुछ भी हो सकता है, चलेगा, you can manage. That's a difference. Oh my God, I now last 3 years return in 20%. Now it is time that market is going to correct. I've been reading. Yesterday also I read an article which says that market is going to correct 20%. Yesterday this guy was saying that market is overvalued at 33 times PE. What are you thinking? What are you reading? What is your mindset? Decide whether are you going to have a patience or not going to have a patience. It's your mindset. Patience is your mind, state of your mind. Patience is nothing more than a state of mind.
Wonderful. I think that's a very good perspective. Sachin, if you have no further questions, I think should we go on to audience questions?
Yes, Vikas, definitely. I'm sure we need to give chance to audience. Yes.
Okay. In fact, I think I will acknowledge the fact that I took up Nitesh Vashni's question first because he said, may I suggest to keep all other speakers on mute while one person is speaking? We took that question first and we did that. I think that has helped. Thank you so much, Nitesh, for your suggestion. So Bharat, I'm going to read out some questions which have come in, and at my discretion, I might just skip a question even though I want to talk about it because you may have already answered it. In spite of that, if you want to answer that question, please go ahead. So I think the first question is from Amit Kishore, and he says, "Hello Bharat Bhai, can you please distinguish between C and A of your PCA framework very quickly?"
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question. So when I say C and A, one I call is a core allocation, and second thing is called alpha generation. So when you create a portfolio, you try to create a core allocation, the allocation which you want to carry. A core allocation is something which is going to give you return over and above inflation and expected growth. So a portfolio which can generate a consistent average or what you call risk adjusted return without giving too much volatility. Volatility, as I mentioned earlier, is your state of risk taking capability. A 2% to 20% may be acceptable range for 6% to 15% may not be acceptable range for somebody. So within your risk taking capability, you allocate a large portion of your portfolio, which is going to ultimately result in desire to own. So if you desire to have a say 10% IRR over a long period of time, you need to know that what kind of a core allocation you need to make in equity, what kind of a return capability that particular portfolio holds, and what can generate. So in a nutshell, when we say what to expect as your normal return from equity over a long period of time, is very simply we say what is the corporate earning growth. The corporate earning growth will be basically what is your nominal GDP growth plus some efficiency which the corporate is going to bring it. So it may be few basis point or few percentage in your nominal GDP growth of the country in which they operate. So it is not going to be India GDP growth. It's ultimately depend where that company operates. In your overall Nifty, what kind of domestic sales you have, what kind of international sales you have, what kind of the GDP in each of those geographies going to have it. Based on the geographies, what kind of returns you are going to generate in INR currency. Plus, those corporates will be able to add more value because they will be able to grow better than those respective country in which they operate. That gives you core earning. Plus, what is given an alpha generation by those corporates. The second line of alpha generation will come from the portfolio managers who is going to allocate money to you. So when you look at core, decide to have an equity, you need to understand what kind of a long-term sustainable return I can expect from equity. Is this return sufficient for me to ultimately achieve my long-term goal? To achieve that long-term goal, what portion of my core allocation needs to go into equity? This is what becomes your core. So
interesting.
It is the framework you have to bring in to make sure that you make a right asset allocation in core. For somebody, fixed income may be a core allocation. For somebody, equity may be a core allocation. Or for somebody, it may be actually a real estate become a core allocation. It's all depend what he really desires from the money. When I generation is basically saying that, okay, whatever it is, ultimately I am investing money, I am ready to take a risk. It is that excess capital which you are ready to invest in an asset class which can provide you a disproportionate return compared to your core allocation is your alpha generation. An asset class which can potentially give you maybe 2 of your core allocation return. At the same time, maybe taking maybe 2-3 times risk compared to what potential loss you can incur in your core allocation is your alpha generation. So the guys who go and invest in, say, startup, the guys who goes and invest into something, they are ready to take that excess risk in desire to generate alpha to their portfolio. Is alpha generation. So are you going to invest 5% of your capital? Are you going to invest 10%? Is the wealth so large that you are ready to take even a 10% of capital and the entire 10% get wiped out? Is not going to make a difference. You are not going to wake up 2 o'clock in the night and say, what the hell happened? If you are ready to take that kind of a risk, you may actually go and end up investing that much of money in the alpha generation strategy. Similar to core, alpha generation strategy for person to person. For somebody, investment in a small cap and a mid cap is an alpha generation strategy because he don't want to take a higher risk. He is contained with a lower risk, but he desire to generate extra return. He picks up an asset class which is little more riskier. It will have little more volatility. It has a probability of losses, and he's trying to allocate a part of that money into the alpha generation strategy. Whereas for somebody, small cap and mid cap may be part of his core allocation, startup, seed capital, startup, what you call venture funding, maybe a alpha generation strategy. It's depend what are you really trying to create a portfolio. A guy with a 5 crore net worth, a 5 with a 50 crores net worth, a 5 with a 5,000 crores net worth, entire portfolio construction will completely change. If I go and tell a 5,000 net worth guy who's coming to me and investing, and if I tell him a fixed income at 4%, that guy most probably will kick me out of his office. He will simply say, Bharat, I called you. This is a wealth for my next 3 generations. I am looking to invest for 90 to 100 year time horizon. What the hell I will do with 4%?
Interesting.
Because marginal utility of money for that guy is 0. It is only state of mind. If he's extremely risk averse, and don't want to take risk with this 5,000 crores, and he's in the state of the mind saying कि boss पैसा बचा के रखो, इतना पैसा तो मेरे 5 generation के लिए बहुत है. He will become extreme risk averse, and then he may look at large cap equity portfolio as an alpha generation strategy.
Absolutely. Very interesting. In fact, the next question I think you've already answered, but Velan, I'm just going to read out your question. I think Bharat has already answered this. Why portfolio is called the heart of wealth creation? Why portfolio has got so much of importance in terms of wealth creation? I think you've already answered that, Bharat. So unless you have something more to add, I'll just move on to the next question.
So ultimately, just one line is that, ultimately, if you don't have a portfolio concept, as I mentioned, it will be very difficult for you to really, achieve your goals in a manner which is best possible risk-adjusted combination which you like to have. And that's a single liner which I like to have. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Because I would like to take a question which I was just reading the questions and I found this very interesting and I would want to put this. So Sajjan Gupta is asking, Bharat, this is to you. What is wrong? He's asked what is wrong with 100% equity allocation. So, let's just put it what can be right / what can be wrong with 100% equity allocation, or for that matter, 100% to one asset class.
Now, I think Bharat has already answered why not 100% to one asset class. I am just saying that, Bharat, if one has to put a gun to your head and say 100% in equity, what are the points you'll find in favor of that? I think that's what he's trying to ask you.
Right.
Unable to hear you, Bharat. Sankalpo, unable to hear you also.
I was just mute. I don't know what happened with Bharat.
Only Bharat can answer this question because
I think he's back.
Both me and Sachin, we are overwhelmingly in favor of equity. So, we can give you 20,000 different points. No. So I would rather let Bharat answer that question.
I hope I'm back and I'm audible.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
So nothing wrong. You don't need to really put a gun on my head to say why can't I have 100% allocation to equity. You can definitely have 100% allocation to equity as far as you understand what kind of risk you are ready to take and what kind of return expectation you can have. And I think as far as you are aligned to that and you are ready to basically live with it, and as I mentioned, with 100% equity allocation, there's nothing wrong. I always said a risk-taking capability and asset allocation goes together. It is very difficult to tell me that 80-20 is good or 100% is bad. My simple question is that with 100% asset allocation, are you ready to lose maybe a 10 or 20% of your wealth in a period of say next year or so? If you're ready to take those kind of 20-30% markdown on your net worth, why can't you have 100% equity? As far as you're young, you don't have value of money, your marginal utility of money is limited, you are still earning, you still have a long period in which you can again build the capital, and you still have that risk capability, and there are no commitments of yours which require a defined cash flow, and you have enough, say, protection, you can take 100%. There's nothing wrong. As I told you, if somebody comes and say, I want to make 100% return over next 2 years, I say, okay, you can do it. Are you ready to lose your pants? You're okay. You welcome. It's your market. This market provides opportunity for everybody.
So the next question is actually there are two people asking a similar question. One is Ketan Hemnani, who says, how should an ideal portfolio be, especially in current times? What sector should we target? And I also have a simultaneous question coming in from Ritesh Seth, which talks about sectors for next 4 to 5 years, according to you, which will perform well. So what should one do in the current market? And I think the corollary to that is what should do one in the current market, looking at the future in mind, next 4 to 5 years. Over to you.
Yeah, I think very appropriate question, but appropriate for a platform. To answer that broadly, see, as I mentioned, and I will just try to bring it for. See, ultimately, you are looking at the cycles. At what cycle you are, decide which sector you want to pick up, and what kind of a earning growth that particular sector can bring in will determine what kind of allocation you want to have. Whether you are looking at 4-5 year allocation, I think most of the mutual fund, most of the AIF, PMSs, which we have a part of our portfolio, including our own PMS and AIF. See, every fund manager does the allocation. Every fund manager try to create that kind of a sector allocation to the portfolio. And as a wealth advisor, I really believe that let it be done by a fund manager who's doing it. Okay, if I want to really do a direct equity allocation to somebody, I'll give it to my research guy who's reading the quarterly results each by day. Every time he's giving the next price target for a stock, and then he's also looking at it. As far as sector allocation is concerned, and the sectors to be, I think we have our model portfolio where we suggest some sectors which need to be overweight and some sectors where you need to do an allocation over and above the allocation done by the fund manager. So typically, when we do a portfolio or a model portfolio construction for our clients, what we do is that we look at what kind of portfolio we are suggesting to the client. And if we believe that there is some under allocation to some particular sectors, bumped up, and that can be done by a sector fund or a sector or a stock, we advise those customers to bring that in. So idea here, we want to in balance between diversification and concentration. And if there is an under allocation to a particular sectors where we believe that there is going to be a 4 to 5 year, as you rightly mentioned, a sector where you want to be allocated, you do it at current junction, which is your question. After cutting all this story short, at current junction, I think we have to look at the sectors which are going to benefit from this entire rebound in the economic activity, the entire infrastructure spending which is globally happening, the new bill which is coming, the one which is going to generate a long-term sustainable demand, and the sectors which will help you to bring that demand is what is going to be beneficiary. The entire automation, entire spending, which what they are doing in healthcare, whether this healthcare price on the stocks actually justify or whether they can generate that kind of earning growth from this price, and whether they're going to be PE re-rating. All those factors need to be factored in before you do a sector allocation on this one. End up buying the best.
I think we just lost him, Sankalp. Did we lose him or is he gone?
I think we've lost him again. I think technology is something that has been bothering us too much today.
Maybe we should have Bharti Airtel next time sponsoring us. Show the bandwidth.
I think we've taken a lot of interesting questions, and
in fact, I was about the next few questions. I was about to give him a rapid fire sort of thing, so that he could answer quickly. Some very interesting questions are coming in, and believe it or not, despite some problem with the audio, we are already 1 hour 20 minutes into the discussion, and it's really starting to become very interesting now. If the admin team could just get in touch with Bharat to find out whether he has a problem logging in. Sankalpur, till the time we get Bharat back, can you just talk to the audience about what PMS AIF World does?
Of course, with pleasure.
Why is it the most preferred platform nowadays?
Of course, with pleasure, and that's something that I've worked very passionately about. So, the audience is already somewhat of an aware audience, because I see some very interesting questions that have come up. And, when I asked them on the poll that how much of they feel is their portfolio is personalized, or how they know the intent of the portfolio, a lot of them said yes. So I think that is what our work is. Okay, probably whoever is investing a considerable sum of money in the stock markets or any other investment asset class per se, financialized asset class, I think we have been trying to bridge the gap between the manufacturer or the fund manager and the investor. And we've been doing a lot of good work where they actually come to know what is the structure of these portfolios, what they should look at. And I think Bharat is back, and we will get to him to answer the next few questions.
Bharat, are you able to hear us now?
I'm sorry, guys. I hope I'm back.
Yeah, you're back, Bharat. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Now we can see you as well. Yes, you're back. So, Bharat, I think your discussion is spawning off a lot of questions.
Am I audible?
So, and yes, you are. You are audible. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Vikas.
I'm audible.
Bharat, if you can hear me. Yeah, you're audible. Bharat, if you can hear me.
I'm audible to hear you, Vikas.
Okay.
That's tricky.
Okay.
Bharat, can you hear me? Can you hear any one of us? I think.
Okay, we'll just wait for a minute more. Otherwise, I think because some of the questions which are coming in are really, really interesting. I've got a question on Bitcoins. I've got a question on ETFs. So some of them are really, really interesting questions coming in. I hope Bharat can hear me now. Okay, I can see his frame there. I've got a question on business cycles. Sorry, asset plus cycles. This is really interesting. I don't know whether Bharat will be able to do justice to this in a rapid fire format.
What we will do is
Sachin, there is a question which I think we've been discussing quite often, that time to sell. Everybody talks about time to buy, but time to sell. Very, very interesting. Bharat, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I'm back. I now I can hear. Sorry, guys. I think this jinx has really caught me. Normally not the case, but
no problem. Because PMS AIF World is now going to send you a request to see if you can put in a word to Bharti Airtel to sponsor our next conference. I think that way we'll have the proper battery. Anyway.
Sorry.
Bharat, what I'm going to request you to do is, we are already 1 hour 24 minutes into this, and I think this has been one of the most interesting ones so far. There are a lot of interesting questions coming in, and this is going to be a rapid fire round. I will ask you to give me answers maybe in 30 seconds or less, maybe yes or no or whatever, right? Otherwise, we will not be able to take these questions.
Okay.
There is Kumar Swami's CV, who says that if the portfolio delivers equal return of benchmark or less, can an investor switch to an ETF? What is your take on this? If I can alter this question and ask you, ETF or active management, what should be the way going forward?
If you're looking for a relative performance, I think benchmark. But if you're looking for a portfolio value addition, then active. If you're just looking to beat the benchmark, I think I'll prefer that you go for a benchmark.
Okay, so Mr. Kumar Swami, I think what Bharat is trying to say, that if you want to buy the market, go for an ETF. If you want to beat the market, you should go to maybe an actively managed fund. Narendra Khadse asked us a question. Does this mean that a company or advisor who has a good database on different asset currency cycles, classes cycles, will be the winner for your clients? Your comments. In effect, I think he's talking about the fact that how often do advisors catch cycles? Do they have enough of knowledge at their end, databases at their end to catch cycles? Is it something which is very important to your portfolio construction?
Yeah, it's actually ultimately the process which the investment advisors follow for portfolio construction is what it's important. And I think there's enough data available. Data is not an issue. It's your ability to read the data and understand what is the cycle and where are you in the cycle.
Very interesting. Sudhir Vora asks, should Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies be a part of one's portfolio? If yes, what percentage should one invest?
I'm sorry, I always talk about Bitcoins. It's a great thing, but fortunately, I only say I don't invest in anything which I don't understand. And hence, sorry, but I just don't invest and nor advise to invest something which I don't understand. And with humbly, I'm accepting I don't understand.
I mean, that is as honest an answer as it can be. I think, I'll move to the next question. This is by Harsh Kadam. And I was just talking to Sachin in your absence. This is a question we often discuss. Many a times people, know when to buy, but they fail to identify the time to sell off. How can we improve our selling ability?
Is ultimately the same thing. When you keep on monitoring your portfolio, your cycles, in which part of the cycle you are, whether the company which you have bought is at the bottom of the cycle or the peak of the cycle, and whether it is richly valued and all, I think ultimately your ability to understand the cycle will decide when to buy and sell. And it's very difficult to pinpoint at what point of time you can just exit. So I think your ability to continuously evaluate the company and understand the potential expected earning growth, and what really market is able to digest in terms of the growth is what will decide. So I think it's a continuous evaluation, and I for a detail will decide and help you in terms of taking a call.
In fact, Harsh, I'd like to supplement Bharat's answer by saying that there are a lot of books which have been written on how to buy a stock, but I think this is the holy grail in terms of identifying when to sell, and as much data, as much information as you can get from people like Bharat. I think that will help you improve your intuitive ability to look at it. But always consult an advisor, and if your advisor is somebody like Bharat on his team, I think you're in safe hands. Srinivasan Vasudevan asks, is core similar to